everyone, Chipmunk of Power here. Let's talk movies. This time around, we are going to cover the sixth annual Oscars, officially from 1934. But the films are from August 1932 to December 1933. The sixth annual Oscars were presented March 16th, 1934, at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. Most nominations overall were for Cavalcade, A Farewell to Arms, and Lady for a Day. Special trivia: this was the only Academy year to date in which a movie, which was not up for Best Picture, received more than one nomination. Walt Disney was the first to win consecutive awards, with Flowers and Trees winning Best Animated Short Subject the year before, followed by this year's Three Little Pigs. Plus, this year, they had a category for Best Assistant Director? Whatever happened to that? That's cool. Also, special note should be made that Frank Capra did not win Best Director, but he thought he had when presenter Will Rogers opened the envelope and called out, "Come and get it, Frank!" Capra was on stage when he discovered Rogers had meant Frank Lloyd for Cavalcade. As to the Best Picture nominees, this year there are 10. One reason for this may be the extension of the eligible time frame, which ran from August 1932 to December 1933, as mentioned. After this, the nominating period ran with the previous calendar year. Okay, so enough about the awards themselves. Now to those nominees. First up, 42nd Street. I was able to watch this on my own DVD. Presented by Warner Brothers, directed by Lloyd Bacon after Mervyn LeRoy dropped out to direct I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. Starring Ruby Keeler and Dick Powell, 89 minutes. The quintessential backstage musical where a nobody chorus girl abruptly ascends to the lead role when an accident befalls the star and a replacement must be found toot sweet, like understudies don't exist? Whatever. Dick Powell particularly is not the actual star, playing the juvenile lead in the stage musical. Our ostensible leads are Warner Baxter, he of Cisco Kid fame, as the passionate director, and Bede Daniels as the star of the show. However, this film did make Powell and Keeler, who had chemistry more than probably anybody else in the movie, household names. It was also Keeler's first film, which shows, but then again, she never became what you might call a good actress. Also, her singing was serviceable and dancing fine for the time, when just straight up hoofing without any particular grace was the style of the day. Really, even with my fine for the time cautionaries, it was her adorability which won out. I mean, really, if her eyes were any wider, they'd fall off her face. There are more than a few pre-code sexual jokes, even ones that missed me until I rewatched a few days ago. Una Merkel and Ginger Rogers are a treat as the wisecracking choristers. The songs still hit, and even with that awkward early dancing style, the routines still work, and are great early Busby Berkeley fun. Even if they were still at the point of trying to convince you this was all happening on stage. In later films, they began and ended, but didn't typically add the "this is all on stage" part in the middle of the routine. Even with overacting in parts, it's a fun little film. A Farewell to Arms. You can watch this on Roku. A Paramount film, directed by Frank Borzage, starring Helen Hayes and Gary Cooper. 88 minutes. You know, I will never get over how ubiquitous Adolphe Menjou was as an actor at a certain time. Here he is as the Italian army friend of Cooper's World War I lieutenant, who supports his friend but also undermines him at times. For his part, Cooper falls for Hayes' nurse, despite his forcing himself on her, which he has some feelings about, but given the time, eventually accepts his advances. The two star-crossed lovers, as they are presented to be, are separated by the war, with his eventually deciding to desert in order to return to her. However, she has relocated in order to have their baby, which she doesn't want him to know about, and he has difficulty finding her. It's really quite Shakespearean when you come down to it, even down to the tragic ending. The real draw here is Cooper's and Hayes' performances, bringing some real humanness to what could easily be a cut-and-dry melodrama. And there are also some great, maybe not war battle scenes, but, still showing the awfulness of it all when Cooper is trying to get back to her. As ever, the early black and white is gorgeous, but there's not really much that's distinctive about this movie. I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. Watch this one on Tubi. Distributed by Warner Brothers. Directed by Mervyn LeRoy. Starring Paul Muni and Glenda Farrell. 93 minutes. Based on the true story of Robert Elliott Burns, who was falsely accused of robbery and sentenced to 10 years hard labor on the Georgia chain gang of the title. He escaped and wound up building a life as a successful magazine editor and marrying. Eventually, however, he was apprehended and sent back to prison. At first he was given light work, but then was once more made to do hard labor. Eventually, he escaped again, heading for New Jersey, where he was found, but the governor refused to extradite him, and he was finally able to live out his days in relative peace. All during his experience, he published many magazine articles, and finally his autobiography, publicizing the injustices of the medieval-esque punishment. Now, the movie does not take a whole ton of noticeable liberties. Muni's character Alan attempts to find work in manufacturing or engineering, traipsing around the country and eventually landing in Louisiana. And when he escapes the first time, he follows up on that engineering work to become successful in that field. His first marriage is depicted as one out of blackmail, with his wife, Farrell, being a gold-digging ne'er-do-well, which is what leads to his exposure. The ending is wonderfully ambiguous, with Muni left on the run, literally walking into darkness with the famous line, "How do you live? I steal." This is a well-made, well-cast film, and it's hard to say if it would be in any better hands than Warner Brothers, who had a reputation for realistic drama. Even so, Jack Warner and Darryl F. Zanuck had to override their story department in order to greenlight it. This is Muni's film all the way, as the character actor rises to the occasion of having to carry the story. He also was a method actor, reading everything on the penal system he could get his hands on, meeting with various prison guards, and studying Burns in order to walk and talk like him. He stated, "I don't want to act like you, I want to be you." And it paid off. Everyone is good here. David Landau, a fixture of early Warner Brothers, as a sadistic Warren still gives chills. But I don't know that this movie would have worked with anyone else. Watch this for the amazing realism. Warning, it can make you feel a little ill. There's a whipping scene off camera, which is still rough, so be forewarned. And Muni's mesmerizing performance. Lady for a Day, which I rented from the library. Columbia Pictures, directed by Frank Capra. Starring May Robeson and Warren William. 96 minutes. It's a Capra film, so you probably have a good idea what you're in for. Robeson is an alcoholic apple seller on the streets of the big city, barely scratching a living. William is a gangster who considers it good luck to buy one of her apples before every poker game. Robeson has a daughter, who she hasn't seen since the baby was a baby, the girl being raised in a European convent. In order that the girl not be ashamed of her mother, Robeson steals hotel stationery and makes herself out to be a fancy rich dowager when writing her daughter letters. Predictably, the daughter comes to visit, bringing her very, really rich fiancé and his snooty father in tow. Robeson is in despair before her friends come to her aid. It's a really pretty funny comedy with heart. William and Guy Kibbe's exchange about William looking much older than he is I found especially humorous, given my husband's insistence that anyone in anything prior to a certain year looks like they're at least 50, which I think is just partly the living conditions of the time and partly the fashion and hair. And Robeson is just so damn wonderful. I'm tearing up just thinking about it. Whew. The ending is straight Capra, with pretty much everyone in the city deciding to be on Robeson's side. Other than the ending kind of cutting off, will she be allowed to keep what she's been given? Because I really, really want her to. It's not at all realistic. But as with much Capra, that's Okay, because you feel that's the way it should be, dang it! And as I've said before, it's important to keep that dream alive. Also, there is a good-natured gay joke. In the 1930s, it's predictably slipped in sideways, but it is there. Little Women, watched on Amazon Prime for $3.99. I had trouble finding this one, oddly enough. Distributed by RKO. Directed by George Cukor. Starring Katharine Hepburn and Joan Bennett. 115 minutes. It's actually difficult to pick one person to name right after Hepburn, as this is advertised as, and rightfully is, her film. It's also hard to pick another person of the time who would be quite as appropriate to play Jo. Most of us know the story of the family of 4 young ladies whose father has gone to fight in the Civil War, leaving them and their mother behind to manage on the home front, as it were, as well as they can. Fortunately, the gals have each other, imagination, and resourcefulness, and also many very good friends in their corner. There's a lot to like here, even besides Hepburn. Bennett is a positive giggle as youngest daughter Amy, despite being older than Frances D. and Jean Parker, who played eldest Meg and third Beth, respectively. Parker also played May Robeson's daughter in Lady for a Day. Other performances I found standouts were Douglas Montgomery hitting all the right notes as Laurie, Henry Stevenson as gruff old softy Mr. Lawrence, and Paul Lucas as the much unfairly maligned Professor Bear, the classic absent-minded professor who's also a big softy and just nuts about Jo. And of course, we have Spring Byington, who I always love as Marmee. Naturally, the story is pared down but hits all the necessary high points, while also naturally keeping the focus mostly on Jo. One can certainly argue that the novel does this too, Jo being the stand-in for Louisa that she is. So, the editing gets the pacing right, the script retains the necessary plot, the performances capture the characters aptly enough. This is a charming rendition and a nice little addition to the Little Women family of adaptations. The Private Life of Henry VIII, currently available on HBO Max, presented by London Film Productions. Directed by Alexander Korda, starring Charles Laughton and Benny Barnes. 97 minutes. This is an interesting take on Henry VIII's marriages, played mostly for laughs and taking a lot of liberties with the realities of the situation and the people involved. Laughton reigns supreme as the titular king who just wants to be happily married to the right woman, but everything keeps going wrong. We pick up just as Anne Boleyn, Merle Oberon, in her third film role, which explains why she's barely on screen, is heading to her death, with Laughton anxiously awaiting the moment when he will be free to marry Jane Seymour. Now, I'm hardly an expert on all this, but I did watch a fascinating documentary on it all once, and according to that, they definitely made some changes. I loved what they did with Anne of Cleves, who, according to record, the one I watched anyway, was apparently just damn awkward and not as attractive as Henry thought, so he offered her the chance to live as his sister instead, and the smart lady took it. In the film, the always just amazing Elsa Lanchester, Laughton's wife, is wanting to marry someone else in Henry's court, so she deliberately makes herself awkward and pulls faces. Henry still ends up respecting her, and she comes off as a very smart lady indeed. This is an odd little movie, and I recommend it for that, and all the performances. Never get tired of Robert Donat either, even though he doesn't have a ton to do here. She Done Him Wrong, watched on the DVD from my library. Paramount, directed by Lowell Sherman, starring Mae West and Cary Grant. 66 minutes! An awful lot of films from this year don't break 2 hours, which is very refreshing, particularly in light of the fact I had 10 to watch. Now, directed by Lowell Sherman is a big statement, seeing how this was adapted from West's 1928 stage play and is nothing less than a West vehicle all the way. Here she is a popular saloon singer from the turn of the last century, popular with most especially the men folks, the hard-bitten woman with a heart of gold that you don't have to dig far to find. Grant is the undercover cop masquerading as a Salvation Army man. There are many melodramatic elements, but the plot here doesn't matter. What you're here for is West singing Frankie and Johnny and other hits, see her distinctive hips move in those dresses, and to hear her double entendres, of which there aren't as many as there should be, but what is there is pretty damn good. Respect for her all the way. The chemistry between her and Grant, I feel, is non-existent, but I always felt he was miscast in the role anyway. An interesting note, there's a lot of these. There is a part where West is talking down to maid Louise Beavers, even calling her 8-ball. And this is a perfect, and timely at this time anyway, point to expand on the discussion that an actor's role does not always reflect their views. It's called acting. West insisted on Beavers being in the film and always insisted on having black actors in her stage shows, which was incredibly controversial at the time. She was as much, if not more, of an ally as were her screen characters. Now, I don't know if I would consider this Best Picture material, and frankly I think it's surprising it was included, maybe just to round out the category, but it is great Mae West material. Smilin Through. Amazon Prime, and a later version got through my library. Okay, before I get into it, full disclosure, I just watched this and only realized when I went to check my info on Wikipedia as I typed the script up that I watched the wrong one. Yes, it was in color, which is too early for color, but it wasn't great color. And it had Gene Raymond and Jeanette MacDonald, so there's a reason for confusion, okay? And that one was pretty good. I will recommend it for Jeanette MacDonald fans and also for Brian Ahern's excellent performance as a man many years his senior. Anyway, I tracked down the correct version, had to pay to rent through Amazon, at least I found it. This one was presented by MGM, directed by Sidney Franklin, starring Norma Shearer and Frederick March. 98 minutes. It is pretty much the exact same thing as the later version. Norma Shearer doesn't sing, of course, except for one song that probably isn't even her, and the ending is slightly different. I liked the ending a little better in the MacDonald version. It had more impact and worked slightly better with the plot timing, but still. Other than that, the main differences are the casting, and this one is in black and white. So, the basic plot is dated but sweet. Shearer and Frederick March play dual roles. In the past, her character, with the absolutely wild name of Moon Yeen, was engaged to Leslie Howard. On their wedding day, she is killed by mistake by jealous suitor March. So, yeah, overall we've got Hollywood 30s actor royalty for this one. March then runs away and cannot be found, so Howard grows old in romantic aching loneliness. So many years later, he ends up as custodian for his almost niece, who grows into Shearer as the spitting image of her aunt. Shearer falls for new visitor March, playing his own son, as his father has passed away, and he has to take charge of dispersing the family estate. And you can guess how Howard feels about this news. So, it's one of those romances. Having the chance to compare the two versions, I rather prefer Brian Ahern in that role, just because, as said, I feel he essays the portrayal of his older self so darn well, but Howard's no slouch, so it's very, very close. In lesser hands, this could easily be a forgettable melodrama, but the studio determined it worthy of A-list talent across the board, and it definitely is the better for it. Nothing particularly imaginative in terms of camera work or other technical aspects, so the performances really matter, and it all works. State Fair. This one was uploaded to YouTube. Presented by Fox Film Corporation. Directed by Henry King. Starring Will Rogers and Janet Gaynor. 97 minutes. A story that has been remade several times, but this is my first brush with it, and also this is the first film adaptation. The novel was only released in 1932. A small country family heads to the fair, the father anxious to show off his big pig, and the mother hopeful about her pickles and mincemeat. Their grown children just want to have a good time, and do they ever, with the daughter finding true love and the son finding what he thinks is true love but ends up being a life lesson instead. It's a simple story, but a charming enough one. Gaynor successfully made the transition from silence to talkies and lights up the screen in one of those timeless ways. Rogers does his homespun best, and it hurts to think how he'd be gone just a couple of years later. Sally Eilers of last year's nominee Bad Girl shows up as a carnival performer. Her daredevil act is dangerous, sure, but also it's funny how it's highly comparable to common thrill rides of today. Louise Dresser as Mother Melissa is also a treat, a hard-working woman who doesn't let her husband get out of showing her a well-deserved good time. It's a solid, if simple, contained little story, which still works well in enough ways to merit a watch. And oh, this brings us to Cavalcade, the winner. Watch this on DVD from my library. Presented by Fox. Directed by Frank Lloyd. Frank Borzage was the original pick, but he dropped out. Starring Diana Wynyard and Clive Brook. 112 minutes. A glimpse into the life of a high-class British family over the course of roughly 34 years from 1899 to 1933, with also a corresponding subplot regarding their servants who leave to start a business of their own. There is high drama as the wars, first the Boer, then the Great War, heavily affect the family, as well as the sinking of the Titanic thrown in there for good measure. This is big stuff, and the film attempts to make a bigger point on the state of society. This would all be great if it wasn't so dang boring. The acting was largely overwrought, stagey, and slow. In my humble opinion, when Clive Brook is one of your best actors, and he was, then you've got a problem. I really just think the main issue here, though, is that the film was trying to take on too much, and it started out from the very beginning not attacking the subject properly. It is hard to pinpoint one thing that was wrong, but if nothing else, things could have been cut down and it would have helped considerably. I'll give points for them trying things. There are parts at the end with montages intercut with the main scenes, which is where Lloyd, or whoever was calling the shots, was really trying to make the larger point. And it is a great try, but it doesn't get there. And with the acting mostly being, as said, stagey, it didn't help to try to elicit sympathy for the characters. Yeah, this is another one of those where you're going, how on earth was this the winner? Sadly, I just cannot recommend a film that had me keep checking my watch. Figuratively, yes, but I do have one. Point of interest on this. This was reportedly Adolf Hitler's favorite film. Not the fault of anyone who made it, of course, and it's hardly pro-fascist, although kind of pro-national. So, anyway, overall, it's a very, interesting thing to know. And that is the entire list of films nominated for Best Picture at the 6th Annual Academy Awards, and I'm exhausted because that was a heck of a lot. That said, hang in there for the 7th. That one I'm already working on, and it is also quite a ride. Have you seen these movies, and what would be your pick? As for mine, I've given it some thought. Lady for a Day is an exquisite little jewel. State Fair is a charming bottle story that stuck with me more than I thought, and Henry VIII was so unexpected and delightful. It is a difficult choice. But I ultimately would pick Fugitive from a Chain Gang. It's not only deeply affecting to this day, but a great biographical account that helped lead to social change, not completely right away, but change comes slowly if it comes at all. Muni's performance carries the film and is still spellbinding, and even so, the film is good in its own right. Those are my thoughts. So what are all of yours? Put them down in the comments below. Until next week, hang in there, champs. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you next time. Bye now.